Hello friends, today's story is called Sacagawea. Today we are going to review the tasks of Lewis and Clark. We are going to describe how Sacagawea came to be part of Lewis and Clark's expedition. We are going to demonstrate an understanding of the word protection. Then we are going to record information about the tasks that Lewis and Clark have accomplished. Today's key vocabulary, we have permanent, plunged, protection, and translate. Permanent is an adjective and it means not changing. The paint left a permanent stain on the carpet. Plunged means fell or dropped quickly. The diver plunged into the pool. Protection means something that keeps you safe. The hikers used sunscreen for protection against the sun's rays. Translate. Translate means to change words from one language into another language. The boy knew 2 languages and was able to translate from one to another. Alrighty, where is the Atlantic Ocean? Over here. What about the Appalachian Mountains? Right here. How about the Mississippi River? Right in here. The Rocky Mountains? Over here. The Louisiana Purchase? The land in between the Rocky Mountains and the Mississippi River. The Missouri River. Right in here. Okay. And how about the Pacific Ocean? Right here. Today's read aloud takes place in the Rocky Mountains. So over here. What tasks have Lewis and Clark already accomplished? They're exploring the animals. They are making friends with Native Americans. Okay. While not a lot of pioneer families who lived in the United States traveled into the Louisiana Territory, many Native Americans had already been living there for a very long time. I want you to talk about or describe the Corps of Discovery's encounter with the Yankton Sioux. It was pleasant. Everybody was nice. Everybody was friendly. They helped each other out. Okay. And what about the Teton Sioux? Not so friendly. But then in the end, they were better, right? Why do Lewis and Clark need people who can speak other languages? They needed to be able to communicate with the Native American tribes, each of which spoke their own language. Someone like George Dreyer is called a translator. A translator is someone who is able to say the same thing in more than one language. He can listen to what someone says in one language and then repeat it in a completely different language. Remember our key vocabulary for today? We've got permanent, plunged, protection, and translate. I want you to listen carefully to find out where Lewis and Clark spent their winter and who they decided to hire as a guide and translator. Oopsie, sorry. As autumn approached, Lewis and Clark were in a hurry. They knew the Rocky Mountains lay ahead, and they hoped to spend the winter there among the Mandan and the Hidatsa. The Mandan and Hidatsa are 2 Native American tribes who had been friendly to Lewis and Clark. However, it was already so cold that the river was freezing into ice, and when the river froze, it was impossible to travel up the river in their boats. Where the Knife River flows into the Missouri, Lewis and Clark found 5 villages of Hidatsa and Mandan Native Americans. Like the other Native Americans living on the plains, these people hunted bison, also known as buffalo, from horseback. They also lived in permanent earth lodges that farmed the land around their homes. This means that they had shelters that they did not move, unlike nomads who moved their shelters with them. 4 or 5 families shared each lodge, and even the horses spent bad weather days inside in a roped-off space just inside the entrance. Across the river from one of the Mandan villages, the explorers built a wooden house and surrounded it with log walls 18 feet high for protection. They made the high log walls to keep them safe. The men of the Corps of Discovery called their winter home Fort Mandan, named after the Mandan Native Americans. They dragged the pirogues onto the river bank, but before they could move the keelboat, the river froze around it. It took 3 weeks to chop the keelboat out of the ice. They had no other worries. Lewis told Clark, "We are eating so much food that we will," or sorry, I had a hard time. They had other worries too. Lewis told Clark, "We are eating so much food that we will run out before winter is over, and in this terrible weather, it's getting harder to hunt." Thankfully, the Mandans appeared one day to tell them, "We have found a herd of bison nearby. Come hunting with us. We have brought horses for you to ride." The result was more food and warm blankets made from bison hides. As the winter nights grew long and temperatures plunged to 30 or even 40 degrees below zero, the explorers also traded with the Mandan for food. In return for the food the Mandan gave, Lewis and Clark acted as doctors or members of the tribes who were sick or injured, and several of the explorers who were skilled as blacksmiths made iron tools, axes, and arrowheads for the Mandans. The party spent many cold nights asking the Hidatses and Mandans about the country that lay ahead. Lewis and Clark kept all the information they learned in a journal. Why do you think he would keep all that information in the journal? To help him remember and to help them on the journey. Maybe they were giving them directions or advice. Okay. Then, one day, a French-Canadian trader appeared at the gates of Fort Mandan. He announced, "I am Toussaint Charbonneau. I heard about you from the Hidatses. I am an excellent cook, and I speak English, French, and several Native American languages. I could cook for you and translate what is said in other languages to English." So remember that Lewis and Clark couldn't speak any Native American languages, so they were going to need people who could talk to them and also talk to Native Americans that they would meet. Also, one of their 3 tasks was to befriend Native Americans. Charbonneau had not come alone. With him was his very pregnant wife, a young Native American by the name of Sacagawea. Sacagawea was a member of the Shoshone tribe who lived farther along the Missouri River. The Shoshone were the next tribe that Lewis and Clark expected to meet. Lewis and Clark discussed Charbonneau's offer. "Sacagawea could be helpful when we reach the lands of the Shoshone. She could show the Shoshone that we come as friends, and as she knows a lot about the countryside there. As for Charbonneau, if he is the cook he claims to be, he would be a welcome addition to our party." Okay. Lewis told Charbonneau, "We want you and your wife to join us, and of course we will pay you for your work." This turned out to be one of the best decisions the co-captains ever made, and while they had agreed to hire 2 new members of the expedition, they soon had 3. One cold night, Sacagawea gave birth to a little boy. Charbonneau, the new father, looked proudly at his newborn son and said, "We shall call you Jean-Baptiste." William Clark laughed. "That's an awfully big name for such a little fellow to carry. I'll call him Pompey." Pompey proved to be a good little traveler, too. Sacagawea's baby was nicknamed Pomp or Pompey. Lewis and Clark organized their notes and drawings and labeled samples of plants and animals that they had gathered. When the spring came, Clark announced, "We have decided to split the party into 2 groups. We will send some of you back to the east to take President Jefferson some of the things that we've collected and written. The rest of us will continue west." Remember, there were no telephones or email yet, and there was no way to send mail in the Louisiana Territory. Lewis and Clark sent some of the Corps of Discovery to tell Jefferson of their progress and what they had found so far. On April 7th, 1805, some of the party returned back east as planned. They carried with them 4 boxes and a trunk filled with plant and rock samples, as well as captain's journals and drawings. They also took with them some living animals, such as a magpie and a prairie dog. A magpie is a black and white bird that makes a lot of noise. Lewis told Clark, "I wish I could see President Jefferson's face when that magpie starts chattering away. The president will be mighty pleased, and he will be delighted with all the information in our journals and drawings." Clark replied, "He will be even happier when you and I report to him in person that we have reached the Pacific." Then the 2 men started westward once more with the remaining men, 1 woman, Sacagawea, and a baby. And that is the story for today. So, who did Lewis and Clark spend their winter with? With Native Americans. Do you remember the name of the 2 tribes? The Mandan and the Hidatse. Okay. Why did they spend their time there? What happened that made them stuck? Their boat got stuck in the ice. How did the Mandan tribe get food where they lived? They hunted buffalo, they farmed, and they lived in permanent earth lodges. And what kind of relationship did Lewis and Clark have with the Native Americans that you learned about today? They had a friendly and helpful relationship with the Native Americans that we learned about, right? Because they helped each other. Lewis and Clark helped the Mandan who were sick, and the Mandan helped the Corps of Discovery find food, right? And the Corps members made tools for the Mandan. Who was Sacagawea? She was the Native American woman that Lewis and Clark hired to help them on their expedition. And how did they think that she could be helpful? She could be a guide and a translator, and she was originally part of the Shoshone tribe, and so they think that she'll be helpful when they get to the Shoshone tribe because she can talk to them and tell them that Lewis and Clark come in peace. Why did Lewis and Clark decide to split the expedition into 2 groups? They wanted to do that so that one group could travel back to President Jefferson and update them with their findings, while the other group could continue their journey west. What did Lewis and Clark have the men take back to Thomas Jefferson? Plants, rocks, animals, journals, and drawings back, right? Why would they keep a journal? So that they can report back to Thomas Jefferson, right? So that he can have all of the information that they've learned on their trip. Which 2 of President Jefferson's 3 tasks did Lewis and Clark accomplish in the read aloud today? The plants and animals, right? Collecting plants and animals, and making friends with the Native American tribes. In the read aloud today, you heard, across the river from one of the Mandan villages, the explorers built a wooden house and surrounded it with log walls 18 feet high for protection. Can you say protection? Protection. Can you clap it out? Protection. How many syllables? 3. Protection. Okay. Protection is something that keeps you safe. I want you to listen to the following list of items. If the item is something that you could use as protection from the cold, I want you to say, I would use that as protection. If it is not something that you would use as protection from the cold weather, say, I would not use that as protection. A coat. I would use that as protection. A bathing suit. I would not use that as protection for the cold. A hat. I would use that as protection for the cold. Gloves. I would use that as protection. What about a pair of shorts? I would not use that as protection. Boots. I would use that as protection. Alrighty. Did we review the tasks that Lewis and Clark have accomplished so far? Mm-hmm. Did we describe how Sacagawea came to be part of Lewis and Clark's expedition? Yeah. Did we demonstrate an understanding of the word protection? Did we record information? Oh, no, we have not done that yet, but you are going to do that as your activity for today. All right. Okay, see you next time. Bye.